And welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is Thursday, February 27th. I want to ask all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent and make sure they're off the table so we can avoid feedback noise. If you notice board members accessing their laptops during the meeting, they are using the laptops solely to access the board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular agenda item, a time limit may be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined to be necessary, keep your comments to within that time limit. So I would now like to call the meeting to order and ask the board secretary to please call the roll.
Okay, Burton.
Here.
Burton, present. Chan?
Here.
Chan, present. Felsenfeld, absent. Lai?
Here.
Present. Laren? Here. Present. McKenzie?
Here.
Present.
And ask the board secretary to please call.
Medina? Absent. Morrow?
Here.
Present. Olagi?
Here.
Present. Pacheco? Present. Stewart?
Here.
Stewart, present. You?
Here.
You, present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I would like to mention at this time that Dr. Felsenfeld, our newest member, recent appointee, will not be with us today due to a family emergency. He will not be attending, but by everything I know, things I think are smoothing out, and I think things are doing well at the moment. So that's all the information we have. But Dr. Felsenfeld will be missing this meeting due to a family emergency. So thank you. Okay, I think at this time we will move to approve the November 14, 15, 2019 board meeting minutes. Ms. Burton.
Okay, this is November 14, 15. On page 2, under Board President Welcome, fourth line should read, Chief Consultant of the Assembly Business and Corrections Committee, Robert Sumner, rather than, it sounds like he's also a member. On the next, at the sentence before last in that paragraph, there is no transition to talk about the fact that the discussions about the access to care and the prescription drug abuse challenges had to do with my end of the year report and my recommendations. And so what I would recommend is that read meeting on November 22nd, 23rd, 2019 in Glendale, California, period. And then the next sentence should be, as she ends her year as president, comma. Burton hopes that the board will continue to work on. The next paragraph, second sentence, there is a 6 at the end of ending. If you would drop that. And, you know, I have this constant thing about we use titles or we don't use titles. And so next to Dr. Hoonley and Dr. Bruce Witcher, it should read, and Ms. Yvette Chappelle Ingram. And then Ms. Burton acknowledged the executive officer. Item 5, first sentence, Brian Skewis is manager of what? It just says budget analyst and then manager. Is he the manager of the budget officer? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's manager in the budget office.
Okay. Next paragraph, next page, item 6, Ms. Rosalinda Olagi. One, two, three, four. The fifth paragraph from the bottom of that paragraph, the DAC directed staff to prepare the proposed language in final format and include all forms to be incorporated. And I'm not sure what forms you're talking about.
No, I mean, it's stated correctly, there are forms that are going to accompany the reg package, forms and applications. So the forms relate to
Okay.
what's going to be part of the
Okay.
reg package.
Okay. Page 5, item 10, third paragraph, state should be capitalized. Page 6, item 11C, 11D, Dr. Lai questioned why members are required to change passwords. At the end there were no public comments rather than was. Page 7, item 15, third line from the bottom, Ms. Yvette Chappelle Ingram. And at the end of that sunset review process, right under that, Ms. again. And I believe that was it. So with that, unless there's something else, I'd like to move the minutes. Unless someone else picked up something.
Further comments? Seeing none? Public comment? Seeing none? Is there a second? Dr. Laren seconded, I heard. We have a motion and a second. Do we take-
Motion to approve the minutes with corrections. Burton?
Aye.
Burton, aye. Chan? Aye. Chan, aye. Felsenfeld, absent. Lai?
Yes.
Lai, aye. Laren? Laren, aye. Mackenzie? Yes. Mackenzie, aye. Medina? Medina, absent. Morrow? Yes. Morrow, aye. Olagi? Yes. Olagi, aye. Pacheco, yes. And Stewart?
Yes.
Stewart, yes. You?
Yes.
You, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, we're now on item 3, Board President welcome and report. So we are all very grateful for the successful completion of our sunset review this past year. And I want to once again just shout out and give a special thank you to past President Fran Burton, Dr. Steve Morrow, Executive Officer Karen Fisher, Assistant Executive Officer Sarah Wallace, and Carlos Alvarez. Those folks spoke and gave their voice to the work that this board has focused on and will continue to focus on our mission of protecting the public that we serve. So thank you very much. We continue to appreciate our board staff for the work that they do, including our legal officer, Michael Konotz, who keeps us on the straight and narrow. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the talents of all those board members sitting around this table, and we are all contributors to the board's success, with the primary purpose of improving the lives of others. Opportunities that I see ahead include working to combat the prescription opioid drug abuse, and as Ms. Burton just alluded to, increasing efforts for access to care as well. Sorry. This year, we will once again engage in strategic planning to help us lay out a vision for the next 4 years. I will ask our executive officer to distribute the dates of that meeting as soon as possible so that we can all put them on our calendars and look forward to attending that very important, probably one-day meeting in Sacramento. So I look forward to working with all of you over these next months, and that's my report. So thank you. So we're on to item number 4, report of the Department of Consumer Affairs DCA staffing and activities.
And Karen Fisher, Executive Officer of the Dental Board. I'll be giving this report on behalf of Kim Kirkmeyer, the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. She's been very busy since being appointed to that position and is working with a skeleton crew, as her deputies have not yet been appointed by the governor. But she is used to multitasking, and as she has done for the medical board for many years, we keep in contact with her on a regular basis and look to her to support our efforts, and she is always available to assist us if we need the assistance. So just going over the report that she's put in the packet, there was a director's quarterly meeting, and she will be conducting individual meetings with the executive officers as soon as she can get some staff. She did talk about the regulations unit that was established in legal department. We have actually one of the new regulatory attorneys with us today who will be participating when we get to the dental assisting reg package, and we'll just have her introduce herself at that time when we start that process. She also put in information about the fiscal reports and board member orientation. The critical point that I want to remind our board members, if you have not finished filing your Form 700, time is ticking. You have until April 1st, but you should be filing it electronically, and you should have already received that email. So I would suggest you try to complete that as quickly as possible. We will be following up and just checking in to see who has completed it and who hasn't, and we'll be sending out reminder notices to everybody. Those people who left office were reminded that they needed to file a leaving office Form 700, and of course Dr. Felsenfeld, as a new member, will be filing his assuming office. So we will keep you posted on that. Ms. Kirkmeyer also reported on the Organizational Improvement Office, OIO, and what's critical here in reading over this is this business analytics. So the dental board is partnering with OIO, and they are coming in and reviewing our processes. We have already, as I've reported in past meetings, started auditing our units to see whether we can change up things to provide service more efficiently and effectively, and we have completed that evaluation in our complaint and compliance unit with good results. OIO did come in and do their own evaluation and agreed that we were on the right track and doing a good job. So we have them scheduled to be coming in maybe as soon as this summer to look at our other units, and so we'll be reporting on that throughout the year on the results of that. And that pretty much concludes the director's report. Are there any questions?
Sorry, I should have used this. So I'm kind of confused of Department of Consumer Affairs oversees us. Does that in any way impact the amount of money that is given to the board, or I don't know how they're connected.
I want to ask the audience, can you hear that clear?
Yep. I don't know how the connection is from DCA to our board. I don't know how will they look over us, but what benefit do we get from them? Do we get paid? I don't understand the connection there. I mean,
Okay,
I'm
so
sure a lot of us
I'll
don't.
try to tackle this question. So the board actually operates semi-autonomously. So the director is over the boards and bureaus and administers essentially the units that provide us service. So the board pays pro rata to the different levels of government above us, the Department of Consumer Affairs being one of them. And in our budget report, we can report how much we pay. We, the dental board, pays DCA. So DCA gets the money to operate from the boards and bureaus that it oversees. So of our $15 million budget, $3 million of it go to pro rata, just under $3 million of it go to pro rata. So the board does operate autonomously, and so it's not often that there is any perceived interference from DCA. They're really there to provide a service and to represent the governor. Is that helpful in answering your question? We pay for services like Michael's time, the public relations. We pay for all the services that they provide. And at the next meeting, we can break that down again. We've gone over it a number of times in terms of what the pro rata pays for. So we can bring that back again. And since we'll have at least one new member, it might be time to bring that back again. Did you have any additional questions? Did I address your question?
No, you did, short of, or let's just Mr. Knotes here. What else do we get from DCA? I just don't, we're paying them for something. What do we get back in return? That's all. Just because, I mean, is it?
I think that, why don't we agendize this for the next meeting, since we don't have it officially agendized, and we'll put together a packet of information that will make it more clear.
Great, thank you.
Okay?
If there are no further questions on that, I think we're moving on to number 5, the budget report.
Good morning, board members. Wilbert Rambala, Administrative Services Manager. I'll be providing an update on the budget. The board currently manages 2 separate funds, the State Dentistry Fund and the State Dental Assistant Funds. The funds are not commingled, and this report is intended to provide the board with an update of expenditures through November 30th, 2019. The first fund I'm going to be talking about is going to be the Dentistry Fund. As of January 10th, the governor has released his budget, and our new budget for fiscal year, as of January, is $15,514,000. Of that amount, the board has spent approximately $5.6 million. $3 million of those expenditures have gone towards personnel services, and $2.6 million has gone towards operating equipment expenses. The breakdowns for those funds is on attachment 1A and 1B. Attachment 1 and 1A, excuse me. The board is projected to revert or save, as you want to say, approximately $1 million for this fiscal year. Even though there's items down here that are red, keep in mind that the board does bottom line budgeting. So the fact that the board will be saving approximately $1 million by the end of the fiscal year is a good thing. If any hand has any questions regarding the attachments, I'll be happy to answer them. No? Okay. Next, I'm going to provide an update for the Dental Assistant Fund. The Dental Assistant Fund is appropriation is approximately $2.6 million. Of that amount, $294,000 has gone towards personnel services, and $377,000 has gone towards operating equipment and expenses. The State Dental Assistant Fund is projected to revert roughly $372,000 by the end of the fiscal year. On attachment 2 and 2A, it describes all the expenditures. If anyone has any questions on those documents, I'll be happy to answer those. Dr. Lai?
I'd like to know where you're doing a good job saving money. Where are we saving the money there? So that's a good thing. Instead of wasting it, what are we doing to have this, windfall of
So a part of those savings are attributed to obviously not being full staff. The board is not currently at full staff, so there's some personnel savings in those line items. And also in regards to contracts, the board projects typically the full amount of contracts in a fiscal year, but at any given time, when we're invoiced, we're not exactly charged the whole amount. Same thing with pro rata. There's an amount that's charged to us, but for some of the line items, we don't spend to the full appropriation or full budget of it. So a lot of the savings right now are attributed to personnel services and some of our contracts.
Okay, so if the personnel services, you're in need of personnel, are the existing personnel being compensated for doing extra work? In other words, you have one person that's now doing the work of 5 people. Is there a raise for these people?
Well, I guess I don't believe that that's true, that one person is doing the work of 5 people. So, what we do is things slow down a bit, but the expectation is that the people that are still there continue to process what their normal workload would be. And if we see that a backlog is occurring, then we'll go ahead and ask for those people who would like to participate in voluntary overtime. They have the opportunity to do that. So we do have a backlog in the dental assisting unit because we have a lot of support staff that those positions are vacant. But we also try to fill those vacancies as quickly as we can. So, but just by the nature of state service, essentially, you have a lot of movement and a lot of people moving around and taking other jobs, and so that would explain that. If I can direct you back to your question about pro rata, so on both of the expenditures, you can see the line where it has pro rata and we've shown you the past history for the pro rata, and we'll explain how the pro rata is determined, but it's on position count in many cases. And so we've actually expanded the number of employees we have on the board. When we have legislative proposals, we try to make sure that if something else is required of the board to do, that we ask for additional staff to be able to complete that work. Because right now we have staff pretty much working at capacity. So anything else that we add on, we try to get additional positions. In doing so, then that increases our pro rata. So we'll go over that at a future meeting, how that all is calculated. But you can see on these 2 reports, the ones that have the yellow. So there's separate pro rata for dental assisting, and it's separated from the dental side.
So then I would like to to finish and commend the people that are working in your staff and yourself for working extra. It was my,
We're always appreciative of staff that are able to come to work and put in an honest day's work for an honest day's pay.
I agree. Thank you for all that.
Dr.
Dr.
I
Ladin.
see Dr. Chen, and then Dr. Laren.
Just a point of information, for the reserve balance, can you describe the process? Is it rolled over to the next fiscal year? And then the second part is unexpended part of the budget. What happens to that?
So it all technically goes back into the fund, in the State Dentistry Fund and to the State Dental Assistant Fund. And so as we are working in conjunction with the department in terms of fiscal years, there are a couple of items that determine how the board's budget is going to be created, and that's based on things like salary rates, retirement rates, peace officer positions, bargaining unit contracts. And so once those determinations are made, there's a bunch of calculations that go behind this one spreadsheet. There's probably like 12 or 13 different spreadsheets that go towards how the board's budget is built each fiscal year. So it goes back into the fund, and dependent on how the budget letters that we receive from the Department of Finance determine, and our previous year expenditures determine how we move forward with a new budget each fiscal year.
So to follow up on that, so the reserve budget is rolled over. In other words, is it constantly accumulating? I think that historically, wasn't there a time when the legislature took money out of these reserves?
So there was a general fund loan previously, and in previous years, they have taken that from programs or boards, committees, or commissions that are able to afford it. So there's typically, quote unquote, what we call a drill, and the budget office will send those items out to determine if programs are able to provide that loan. As of now, all general fund loans have been repaid to the board, and interest has been accrued on those items. But at this moment, at this time, it is not foreseen that there's going to be any GF loans.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm curious about the reimbursements. I mean, who gives us the money? What are the fingerprints for? And in the amount of unscheduled reimbursements, what is that about? I just want to learn more about that. Thank you.
I don't have every single reimbursement, but just to give a general overview, there are some items that the board pays for on the front end, like say hard card, I believe fingerprints, and then I believe we are reimbursed for those items. Same thing with like probation monitoring efforts as well. There's a cost that to the licensees, and so on the front end, the board does pay for some of those items, and then we are reimbursed. But I can go back and research more of the reimbursements if you would like to know a detailed breakdown. Thank you.
Item 6, the discussion and possible action regarding appointment of new registered dental assistant and extended functions, I believe is going to be handled by Tina Valerie. And Tina, will you also do number 7, update regarding the dental assisting? Are you-
Yeah.
Or I'll have Karen do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning. Tina Valerie, manager of the Dental Assisting Unit. I am handling agenda item 6, possible appointment of a RDA-EF examiner. The board administers practical and clinical examinations to applicants seeking licensure as a registered dental assistant in extended functions. These examinations are graded by examiners appointed by the board. The board has received an application from Dr. Frank Liu, who is interested in serving as an RDA-EF examiner. His qualifications have been reviewed by board staff and the chief examiner, Dr. Richard Frieden, and we are recommending the candidate be appointed as an examiner for the RDA-EF clinical and practical examinations.
We have a motion, we have a second. Discussion? Dr. Chan. Then Dr. Lai.
Going to disclose that I have not met Dr. Liu. I don't know him, but he is employed by the Tri-City Health Center in my city. So it's just a disclosure.
Thank you. Dr. Lai.
I just want to know how many examiners we have now for EF, RDA-EF.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but if I did a good guess, I would say about 14. We are recruiting several new ones. We have 2 examiners that are doing really well in the efforts of recruitment for us. So we are constantly recruiting, but I believe currently we have about 14.
So North and South and Central have the equal amount of EF evaluators?
Honestly, I think right now we're heavier in the South. We don't have an equal number in both, so we do travel the examiners as necessary to administer the exams.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be having a future discussion about this because, as in a lot of our positions, our examiners, our subject matter experts are aging out, and we don't see the interest from younger people to start participating as examiners or subject matter experts, but we'll leave that discussion for a future meeting.
So I have a question for Rosalind. Are there more assistants seeking EF? I'm hearing that more in San Francisco. That's why.
I would say yes. Compared to a year ago or even a year and a half ago, there are now more clinicians, I feel, supporting their RDAs to pursue an EF2 due to what the scope of practice will help the practice and help patients.
Do they have to go to a program? Like, I know
Yes.
UOP is starting now.
UOP, and I think maybe that will be in the discussion for future to see how many other EF programs are starting or asking for approval. But yes, there are going to maybe be a need in 3 to 5 years long-term for the amount of students that are looking to seek an EF2.
So I think in the future, we have to make sure it's not only through the major universities. I think some of the programs, the dental assisting program should kind of ramp up on that, and I don't know if there's a qualification that we have to
I know
seek from them too.
Loma Linda has one, UCLA has one, USC, but there is one in Southern California that's in Paris that is not run by a university. in
Correct.
Paris.
So
there's a few.
my idea is, we're going to have to really look into that and how, what the criteria is to have that move forward.
Any further discussion? We ready to vote? Public comment?
Okay. Roll call here. Burton?
Aye.
Burton, aye. Chan?
Aye.
Chan, aye. Felsenfeld, absent. Lai?
Yes.
Lai, aye. Laren? Laren, aye. McKenzie?
Yes.
McKenzie, aye. Medina, absent. Morrow? Morrow, aye. Olagi? Halagi, aye. Pacheco, aye. Stewart?
Aye.
Stewart, aye. You? Yes. You, aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
I think we're now on item number 7, update regarding dental assisting council members.
Thank you. Again, Karen Fisher, Executive Officer, reporting on this item. As you will recall, last November, the board appointed Stacy Welch to fill the RDA-EF position. After further consideration, she declined that appointment, so we put it back out for recruitment. So we are recruiting 2 vacancies we have, one for an RDA who's in clinical practice and for an RDA-EF. The deadline for filing the application is March 31st, so we will anticipate that we could be bringing forward some suggested appointments at the May meeting to fill those empty positions. Also, Ann Contreras, this will be Ann's second meeting that she's missed, and she is at this point not responsive to our trying to reach her. So I'll be trying to work with her to see whether or not she's still interested in serving. If not, the board may have to move forward and actually remove her from the position in order to re-advertise and try to fill that position. That's for a faculty position. So we'll keep you posted. So this is just an update. There's nothing to vote on at this point. I will be guessing that in the past, the 2 board members who have served on the DAC will be the subcommittee, but that will be up to Dr. Stewart to determine who will be the subcommittee. And what typically is done is they review the applications that we receive. We line up interviews that are done by telephone, and then they come back with a recommendation. So Dr. Stewart will be notifying the subcommittee in the near future. Any questions?
At this time, we're going to be convening the joint meeting of the Dental Board and the Dental Assisting Council, and we are allotting about 2 hours for this work, and we think that in order for this to move along as efficiently as possible, we are going to limit the public comments until after the Board and Council does its work. Once we have the Board and Council finished with the agenda item, then we're going to ask for public comments. And so if you can accommodate us in that way, we think we can get through this material a little bit easier. So thank you.
So we can ask for Cindy and Melinda to come to the table.
Ready, Cindy and Melinda, to come to the table, please. And I think we have...
They have to.
We'll take the roll call for the DAC.
Do you have that folder in front of you? The roll call for the DAC? Rose, it can be either you or Cindy. It's just the roll call, so whatever you want to do.
Okay, so calling attendance for the Dental Assisting Council. Is it Caceres? Caceres? Yes. Okay. Present? Contreras, absent. Olagi? Here. Ovard? Pacheco?
Here.
And that is all we have.
You need 4 for a quorum.
So we have a quorum.
Awesome, thank you. So you can convene the joint meeting. Hand it over to Gabe.
At this point, we're going to be convening the joint meeting of the Dental Board of California and the DAC, and I'm turning that over now to the people that are going to help us do that, Gabriel and Danny. Are they able to come to the table? There they are. Please introduce yourselves for the benefit of the audience and all of us to get to know you a little bit better. Thank you.
Good morning. Gabriel Nevin, Legislative and Regulatory Analyst for the Dental Board of... How's that? A little better? So I'm Gabe Nevin, Legislative and Regulatory Analyst for the Dental Board of California.
And I'm Danielle Rogers. I just joined the Department of Consumer Affairs in October of 2019. Before that, I had a career as counsel to a superior court in the local Sacramento area. I'm very excited to meet everyone and work with you on regulations.
Thank you for that. I believe we have some minutes to go back to, and so I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
There was one question I had on the minutes. There was a typo, a correction needed to be made. On page 4, under section 1070. Second line, it says 30-hour requirement for educational mythology. It should be methodology.
Thank you.
Oh, but mythology.
Well, I figured it might be kind of fun, but...
What happened to spell check? All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second. Can I second?
Thank you. Olage did.
Cindy Ovard, second. Is that what I say? Okay.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. We'll call the roll.
Do I fill each paper out? Okay, so how many do I have here? Sorry. Caceres? Wait, that's the wrong one. Let me get the voting one. Sorry, I'm new here. Okay. So voting on the minutes. Caceres?
Aye.
Contreras? Absent. Olagi?
Yes.
Ovard, yes. Pacheco? And 4 members pass.
Okay, now we're ready to start.
All right, ready to start. Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
Okay, so are we moving to agenda item 2 now? And just so that everyone is on the same page, we've updated the memo. Unfortunately, we were unable to complete the forms in advance of this meeting, and so we will just be reviewing the proposed language and hoping that the council will accept it, and we will be presenting then the forms at the next meeting so that we can initiate the rulemaking.
Gabriel, will you pull that mic way close? I'm
Okay.
sure people in the back of the room may be able to hear, but it's not so clear up front. Okay, so
Is that a little better for you guys?
that's much better,
Great.
thank you.
Okay, so our thought was we were gonna do this like the last DAC meeting where we went through the track change marked comments, and then the council can accept the staff comments, come up with a different formulation that they would like to use, and then we can move on to the next one, and when we get to the end, we will take public comment, and then the DAC can vote. So, starting with
And Gabe, if you could use the page numbers that are the PDF page number?
the page
So-
number out of 161, or
So-
the meeting material page number?
Meeting materials.
Okay. So we're here on meeting materials, page 56. We have a comment here. So the proposed language adds a requirement that faculty demonstrate expertise in subjects they are teaching. However, no criteria for demonstrating expertise are provided. This was modified from possessing experience, and staff recommends reverting to possessing experience or make changes to track the Coda language. The Coda language requires that dental assisting faculty must have background in and current knowledge of dental assisting, the specific subjects they are teaching, and educational theory and methodology consistent with teaching assignment, e.g. curriculum development, educational psychology, test construction, measurement, and evaluation. So staff recommend changing to shall be able to demonstrate expertise in each subject area for which they are teaching, to have a background in and current knowledge of the subjects they are teaching, and the educational theory and methodology consistent with their teaching assignment. DAC members, comments? Accepting this, or,
I accept that.
okay. Anybody else? All right, so we'll accept that and move on to the next one. We're at page 57. 1070L3 was modified to require faculty calibration meetings be held every instructional period instead of annually. This would prevent a faculty member being hired in the middle of the year and not attending a calibration meeting until the beginning of the next year. So there are several sections where we failed to implement that change, so we're bringing this back to the DAC to make sure that we want to put these in at 1070D1 big E, 2 big E, 3 large E, E2E, F2E. All still reference the annual calibration frequency. So with approval, we will change that to the language that was accepted for the other sections. You guys have any comment on that?
Yes, I accept that.
Okay. Excellent. Anybody else?
I second.
Good. Okay. So some of these now are going to be repeated because they reference multiple sections that are going to be changed. So this is another one that you guys have now accepted related to the frequency of calibration. So if we can approve that, we can move on. Good. Thank you. So,
Gabe, if I can just interject here, you know, we're really leaning on our DAC friends that have been going through this material for a number of years now, and we have several of them around the table, so we're leaning on them for information. But if the board has any questions or concerns or comments, it's very appropriate. This is the time to have that discussion. So, okay?
excellent.
Please continue.
All right, we're here on meeting materials, page 58. This would be comment 4. 1070D3 capital B requires that faculty in RDAEF programs possess 2 years of experience in clinical chairside dental assisting involving four-handed dentistry. Stakeholders have pointed out that similar sections have been reconfigured to reflect that the point of the experience requirements are that faculty have experience working in the capacity which they will be teaching students in. Therefore, staff recommends changing this requirement to 2 years of experience working as an RDAEF in a clinical setting.
I agree with that.
Excellent. Okay, seeing no. Okay, the next two comments then are related to the possessing experience and the calibration periods. So those have been accepted, and if we don't have any Nothing against that. We will keep moving. Same thing with comment 7 on page 59 and comment 8 on page 59. Same thing with comment 9 on page 60. Same thing with comment 10 on page 61. And so now comment 11 at page 61. The requirements for program and course facilities have been updated to require either lecture classrooms or equipment for broadcasting lectures online. And stakeholders have pointed out that the terms broadcasting and online are unnecessarily prescriptive. So staff has recommended a terminology change that is less technology specific and more directed at the desired outcome of providing students the ability to receive instruction in a different time and place than the instructor.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else. So at page 62, 1070H1 provides for health and safety standards and requires written protocols for emergencies be provided to students. In addition to these written materials, stakeholders have requested the addition of the following language related to standardized safety data sheets, which staff agree would be a valuable addition. So all students and faculty shall have access to a resource notebook to include safety data sheets for all materials and chemicals used in the program or course. I'm
Yes,
seeing head nodding, accepting
I
that?
agree.
Excellent. Okay, at page 64, we have a reference to qualified faculty, which could confuse people into believing that there is a difference between faculty and qualified faculty. The qualifications for faculty are enumerated elsewhere, and all faculty must be qualified or they may not serve as faculty. So we recommend removing qualified faculty here.
Yes.
Thank you. So now we're at page 65, comment 14. We received a lot of feedback regarding the new requirement that patients and students complete a health history and consent acknowledging that patients of students complete a health history and consent acknowledging that a student is performing procedures on the students and requiring that the health history and consents be transferred back to the course or program. A lot of people have pointed out that this is very burdensome and probably violates HIPAA. And we could maybe change it so that it wouldn't, but it seems like it would be an awful lot easier to just drop the requirement. So we're recommending that we change subsection 5 to state that such documentation shall be maintained in the clinical facility. We're not recommending removing the requirement to receive written consent and acknowledgement from patients before allowing students to perform clinical duties. We believe this is a matter of informed consent and has liability ramifications for students and clinical facilities and potentially programs too. So we do think that we should keep that in there, but we recommend dropping the requirement to move records around. Any comment?
Yes, no.
No. So we're accepting that and moving on. And you guys may notice some track changes comments. Those are all going to be non-substantive, clarifying, or conforming changes. So nothing that the council needs to worry about. So here at page 77, comment 15, stakeholders have pointed out that programs are currently allowed to accept a student's certification in basic life saving from another education provider. Therefore, this will require the requirement that programs offer this will require programs to add new certifications to their curricula and additionally could affect course sequencing. So the current language at 1070.2D9, big D, adds the requirement for BLS certification. The program may require that the student complete this course as a prerequisite to program enrollment, or that the student provide evidence of having completed the course from another provider. Staff recommends that this caveat be added back to the proposed language to allow programs flexibility in offering and sequencing their courses.
I agree with that.
Yes.
Okay. So same page, at comment 16, stakeholders have pointed out that many linear dental assisting programs enroll students in IC OSHA courses simultaneously with other chair-side X-ray and patient assessment type courses, and therefore requiring these programs to ensure that students have completed a comprehensive written final IC OSHA exam prior to performance of procedures on patients will require dramatic and expensive revisions to their program sequencing and curriculum design, and doesn't yield substantial safety increases because students are overseen by faculty who ensure that all IC and OSHA protocols are followed. So staff recommends a reversion to the current language of 1070.2D8 big B, which requires that programs provide instruction in IC and OSHA, but does not require the completion of a written exam prior to performing procedures on patients, and add language requiring that faculty maintain all IC protocols and OSHA regulations. Accepting that?
This one's been a kind of a long discussion that we've had over it, and I realize that there's linear, there's wheel programs, there's different programs, but you're dealing with patient safety. You're dealing with, and I know faculty, we realize faculty have the knowledge, but sometimes faculty aren't there seeing every little thing. If the students don't know in full detail why they're doing what they're doing, they're just going through the motions. And having to have a written exam after the fact, to me, is not patient safety.
Anybody else?
Cindy, what are we looking for the language to be maybe adjusted to then? What would ideally to ensure that patient safety is the first focus?
Well, when it says, have a written exam, I guess it's a written exam. It's just depending on how in detail are they going. I know at one point there was language where it said 100-hour course of infection control and OSHA, so that was taken out. But just to say that the faculty's over it and the faculty will oversee, if the student really doesn't understand it or doesn't know, we don't know because they haven't taken a final, they haven't taken a written exam. All they've had is a didactic discussion. So what's to know that they actually do know the protocol or the correct protocol and just go through the motions of what the faculty are telling them?
So we are proposing, and we would like to propose that a final exam of some sort
Yes.
be taken. Okay.
Okay, so that would be maintaining the language and not accepting the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Was that the will of the council? Do we need a majority on that? I'm actually not sure about the protocol for that.
So I disagree with the new language. Is that
Okay.
how I should say it?
Yeah.
I think you're good.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, so for the record, we are going to not use the staff recommendation and revert to the section there on page 77 that has been crossed out related to this, so that everybody is clear. Okay, so the next comment is at page, oh, excuse me, that's actually not a comment we need to deal with. But page 94. So, that's comment 21. At 1070.3F describes the hours requirement for excuse me.
Did we just pass over
Sorry, yeah,
18
I
and-
skipped something on
Okay.
page 93, excuse me.
How about 86?
No,
Is it-
that, sorry, that one on page 86 is not actually for the council right now.
Oh, okay.
That shouldn't have been in there, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry for the
So
confusion.
disregard that.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're at page 93, comment 20. So the proposed language related to courses reference the requirement that a single standard of care is maintained by courses. The term single standard of care is not defined. Furthermore, the sections which reference this language are detailed requirements for how courses should operate and the standard of care that they must maintain. Because this term doesn't have a definition and does not clarify the any other requirement, staff recommends removing this term and the language around it. However, if the board or council decides to keep this term, staff requests help with the definition.
This might be a good time to ask Michael if he's comfortable talking about this issue of standard of care.
Actually, Ms. Rogers is more fully prepared on this package, so I would defer to her for the time being.
Certainly. When we looked through the package and we saw the phrase "single standard of care," it presented a clarity problem. It doesn't, because it's not defined, it's not clear necessarily to the reader what that means. And so what we recommended is that we either delete it or come up with a definition that we would insert in a definition section to clarify to the reader what it meant. We weren't sure what was meant to be conveyed by that phrase.
And I'll add that, echoing on Gabe's comments, that with all of the requirements for the course and what must be taught, that statement about standard of care really, it does seem to me as to be surplusage and could create potential problems because the standard is what's stated in the standards for the course and how the course is administered.
Agreed.
I would be okay with deleting that line.
Okay, so we're going to accept that?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to page 94. So 1070.3F describes the hours required for PIT and Fissured courses. The proposed language currently requires no less than 16 clock hours in length, consisting of a combination of didactic laboratory, simulated clinical, and clinical instruction designed for the student to develop minimum competency in all aspects of the subject area, including at least 4 hours of didactic training, at least 4 hours of laboratory training, and at least 8 hours of clinical training. This formulation does not include a specific requirement for hours of simulated clinical training, and a course could, under this formulation, include only nominal simulated clinical training. However, simulated clinical skills are now included on the examination requirements at 1070.3G5. Therefore, staff request that the council establish a required number of hours of simulated clinical training. Staff suggests dividing the required laboratory in half and using a formulation that has 4 hours of didactic, 2 hours of laboratory, 2 hours of simulated clinical training, and at least 8 hours of clinical training.
This kind of goes hand in hand with the others that we've seen on the next page, where if we keep the same hours, but we lessen the patients or lessen the material, there's a lot of time left over. There's a lot of downtime. If we have 8 hours and only 2 patients, that's a lot of time that is unnecessary. So is there a way to maybe juggle the hours a little bit different?
Yeah, we can come up with any formulation that the council wants right now. So if 8 hours is too many, then it would be easy enough to just make them all
Because you're going to have more, you would need more with the lab training and the simulated clinic training
Yeah.
than you would need for the patient base. Because patient, it's not going to take you 8 hours to do 4 people or 2 people.
Okay. So does it make sense to do 4 hours for each of the different types for 16? Excuse me, for 16
4, so
total.
you'd still have,
Right, we're essentially adding hours to
yeah, yeah.
Didactic, laboratory, simulated, clinical, and clinical.
Yes.
Cindy, can I ask you?
Yes.
What types of laboratory training are we talking about here? Are we talking about alginate impressions? Are we talking?
No, this is Pitt and Fisher. So this is Pitt and Fisher, so it's teaching the students how to place Pitt and Fisher. So the clock hours are 16, so you have didactic time, you have lab training where they're doing it on their typodont, simulated where it's more simulated on a Fletcher type, and then clinic. So if we went about doing 4, I mean, just kind of do 4, that would be better than having 8 hours for the patients.
Okay. Well,
do-
we can implement that, if
Do you
that's,
see that?
Right.
Rose?
Mhm.
No?
I agree,
Okay.
yeah.
But I think the 16 hours, keeping it with Coda would be good
Okay.
along there, but just, the hours just didn't seem to go along there. So changing that would be good.
okay. So we will implement 16 clock hours with 4 hours distributed across the 4 categories of instruction. Okay, so on page 95, comment 22, we've received a substantial amount of feedback about this, and it has now been changed a number of times, and it was changed to 1 patient required at the last meeting, and we have received a substantial amount of feedback about that and recommend changing it to a formulation that includes 2 patients. That will bring it in line with the CODA requirements. And the whole exercise here was to try and get everybody to be approved by CODA, so we think that that's a good standard to follow.
Well, there's some programs that are not CODA approved, just in the state of California, because California doesn't necessarily have to have CODA to be California approved program, or dental board approved program. So keeping all of the programs aligned with CODA is not really necessary, but in order to keep our language the same, I understand where we want to keep it that way, to keep the community colleges and those programs that are CODA, to keep them with their regulations. So I did like this change. So I think this change is good. I approve this change.
All right.
I did have a question on applications. So when it said laboratory applications, what is application? What does that mean? No less than 4 lab applications.
Would be an application.
Is that one application is 1 tooth? Is that how that, I think that's what it meant. But
Well,
when
it
it
would-
says no less than 16 teeth total, no less than 4 lab applications. So that would be 4 teeth. So applications means 1 tooth. Is that correct?
I don't know that that is what is specified here. If the council feels that 2 applications in 1 teeth, or excuse me, in
No,
1
I'm not
tooth
questioning.
doesn't work, then
I'm not questioning the number, just what the application word meant.
that would just be an application of
Okay.
the sealant materials, my understanding of it.
Yeah, okay.
But if we need to clarify that, we can.
What do you think? I approve this.
Okay. Does that go for everybody else?
Aye.
No? Okay. Okay. So on page 96, comment 23, it appears that patient selection is a reference to determining when a particular treatment is appropriate and when it is not for a particular patient. However, this is adequately covered by indications and contraindications, and so staff recommends removing these references to patient selection criteria.
Will you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So, some of this language predates me. So, the patient selection stuff and what I've spoken with Dr.
Okay.
Witcher about the patient selection factors are just indications and contraindications of when a treatment is
Right,
appropriate.
okay, yes.
Is the more general clinical term for that. And so we have that covered in other places, and this effectively is duplication at that point.
I agree with that.
Unless there is another consideration.
No, delete the language. Remove the language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to accept that. On page 97, comment 24, 1070.3I3B details the clinical experiences that students in Pitt and Fissured Sealant courses must be evaluated on after completing their didactic instruction. The requirements listed here have been the same as the examination requirements listed at subsection G5. However, they're listed in one sentence instead of broken out across multiple sections, and the result is a section that's pretty hard to read. So staff is recommending just changing it to reference the examination requirements in the other section.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to page 105, comment 25 is the single standard of care again. I believe we accepted that. On page 106, at comment 26, this is another example of the health history requirements that we've accepted.
Yes.
And at page 116, comment 27, it's another reference to the single standard of care that's been accepted. Accept that again. So now at 118, there's just it's a non-substantive section move that we want everyone to be aware of. And then from page 119 to page 120, comment 29, the proposed laboratory simulated clinical and clinical instruction does not actually describe rules for these types of instructions as it's been drafted. The existing 1070.5 only requires that courses provide didactic and laboratory instruction and examination. The current section spells out requirements for optional extramural clinical instruction. It's optional because the current requirements for examination do not require that, but do provide guidance for courses to choose to offer it. The draft section appears incomplete because it does not fully lay out the requirements for lab or clinical instruction, and the subsections which do reference lab clinical instruction repeat other subsections that have been used in other sections. So the existing language has limited rules for the lab component of instruction other than requiring 2 hours of it. And the existing 1070.5 does have rules related to extramural facility requirements, which are absent in the proposed language. Basically, what I'm sketching out is that it looks like we kind of had a drafting error where we were reusing a section from another subsection, and it is not entirely clear what was meant by it, and so I'm proposing to revert to the old section that is in current regulations related to the clinical, to the extramural clinical guidelines. So it would be to remove this section that doesn't make a ton of sense and go with the current language as we're using it.
I agree.
Okay. So on page 126, comment 30 is again the single standard of care that we've accepted elsewhere. Page 133, comment 31 is again a reference to the single standard of care. It's been accepted. Page 142 is another reference to the single standard of care, a comment that's been accepted. Page 159, comment 33 is another reference to the single standard of care, which has been accepted. Page 160, comment 34, 1070.9D2 was restructured to allow students who are taking courses as part of a dental assisting program to enroll in classes which they have not completed the prerequisite instruction if the course plans to provide that instruction concurrently. This exception to the prerequisite should have extended to IC and BLS certification required by this section. Therefore, staff recommends changing this section to allow course sequencing as it is currently permitted. This would be in keeping with the other changes that we've made.
But if infection control is different, will that have to be taken out? It's line 3 on, let's see, what line are we looking at? 18, line 18 on that page. Unless you're just talking about basic infection control, unless you're talking about the course of infection control before clinic patients.
Yes. I believe
Okay.
That's what the reference is.
Okay.
Okay. Then there on comment 35 is the health history stuff that has already been accepted. And comment 36 is the online broadcasting change that we accepted also. So on page 165, comment 37, was it 1070.9L states that extramural dental facilities may be utilized by a course for the purpose of radiographic clinical experiences, but may not be used for final clinical competency. Stakeholders have pointed out that this prohibition is inconsistent with the coronal polish and pit and fissure course requirements. Furthermore, clinical competency must be evaluated by faculty, and it should not matter where this is done. Therefore, staff recommends removing this burden on the courses. In addition, 1070.9L states that didactic and laboratory instruction shall be provided only by course faculty or instructional staff prior to clinical performances and shall not be provided in an extramural dental facility. Staff recommends that this prohibition against providing didactic instruction in the extramural dental facility be removed so that the section reads didactic and laboratory instruction shall be provided only by course faculty or instructional staff prior to clinical performances. Instruction must be given by course faculty, and therefore it should not make a difference where the instruction is provided. If students require instruction in an extramural facility and faculty are able to do it, they should be able to do it.
I agree.
Okay. So there's another comment on page 167 that is actually not for the council's consumption either. Excuse me. think that's it. All right, so I believe then that we need to take public comment, and then you guys can vote on that.
Is there any public comment?
Hello, Melody Randolph and Kara Miyazaki. We're both co-legislative chairs for KDAT and DAGGERS, the educators groups in California. First, we would like to say thank you to Sarah, Tina, the lawyers, everybody that has worked hard on this, and we appreciate that you listen to our concerns and our faculty, collective faculty concerns over many of these issues, and these changes overall in general are excellent in the right direction, and we really appreciate you listening to us. There are just a couple of concerns remaining that we have. The first one on the infection control change to require a written exam, infection control exam prior to working on patients. We believe that the...
Melanie, I don't want to interrupt, but can you go to the document and identify what particular section you're looking at?
Absolutely. I wrote down the page numbers. It's 28 of the, thank you, 77 of the meeting materials.
Thank you.
77, let me go to it.
So just for clarification, NG are the initials of Gabe, so that's what that stands for. So you only really need to reference the number.
So page 77. No, it's not.
NG 16.
Okay. Well, no, NG is Gabe's.
Well, they're all Gabe's.
Where's your? Let me see yours. Okay. So, in discussing the...
I'm sorry, Melanie, you got to pull that mic
Thank
up
you.
to
Don't. Yeah, thank you. So we are on number 6. H6, all programs shall provide students with instruction in the California Division, OSHA, and the board's minimum standards of infection control. The staff recommendation was to accept the fact and recognize the fact that faculty oversee the students' clinical experiences, and taking out the original recommendation of having a written exam, infection control exam prior to clinical experiences. It is our belief and experience, many years of experience, that though a student can pass a written exam doesn't mean they can actually physically do the procedures. And being able to actually physically do correct infection control procedures on patients is more important than whether or not they can pass a written exam. So passing a written exam prior to actually having to work on the patients doesn't solve the issue. The issue is they need to be able to function safely and effectively in proper OSHA infection control, and that is supervised by faculty who are skilled and knowledgeable in these issues. So a written exam is not the answer, and staff's recommendation changes were wonderful, and we would like to go back to the staff's recommended changes.
I'd also like to add that at Foothill College, we have one dental programs clinic with 18 units, but we share that with 48 dental hygiene students, 2 separate classes. And in order for me to teach infection control first and have them take a written exam, it would affect a huge number of people, because that means that the clinic has to be free for the students to take this class, and it would be offered like the first week of the quarter, and the dental hygiene students are already seeing patients at that point. So it would be a huge logistical nightmare, and if the college had to choose between dental hygiene and dental assisting, I could tell you that they wouldn't choose dental hygiene. The other thing is we teach our class an hour and a half a week, so that's 18 hours, and I am adding 12 more hours of lab for that course. And so it just makes it kind of prohibitive to try to teach that class before we teach all the other classes too as well. We don't teach just the minimum, we teach at a higher level for this course. So in order for me to add the 3 more extra hours of lab, I'd really like to have the luxury of teaching it over the quarter, a little bit at a time.
Claudia Pohl, CDAA, and I would concur with Melody's comments about thanks to all the staff and everyone who's worked on this, and for listening to the concerns and bringing back the revisions. And again, on the whole, the revisions are wonderful. Everything is great. A couple of minor things. I would also concur that this is problematic. It isn't the issue of taking a final exam for infection control. It's the timing of the exam. This reverting back to the old language would require a final exam on infection control prior to working on patients. So for the programs that are on a wheel, it might not be problematic, but for programs that are block, the traditional program that is a 16 or 18-week semester, they are working concurrently. So they are doing their laboratory proficiency before they work on a patient, right? But if they had to do a final exam before they could work on a patient, that would mean a 16-week course, and they wouldn't be able to do radiology, chairside assisting, any of those things until they took that final exam. So it would mean a total restructure of those programs. So it's the timing of the final exam, not the final exam, and we would like to see the language go back to what staff had in the revision as well. Thank you.
The second issue that we have is the sealant issue, and I know we've gone back and forth on the number of patients, the hours, and all that. So Claudia's looking up the page number here, page 95 of the meeting materials, top of the page, comment 22, regarding the number of applications for laboratory simulated devices and live patients. The original wording was 4 patients, 1 tooth in each quadrant. There's been lots of discussion over the years on this issue. It's a big issue for all of us. And we polled all of our members, and I forgot to bring the actual numbers, but the vast majority of, and I can provide that information if you want it in the future, but the vast majority of the educators did not want any reduction in the amount of patients required to do sealants. It is much more important if we're going to increase the requirements on lab and simulated and decrease the patient requirements. That doesn't make any sense. It is more important that students are able to effectively place sealants on live patients than on a typodont that doesn't have saliva, a tongue, all of the other things that you deal with patients. So we would strongly recommend that we either keep the requirement of 4 patients or at the most reduce to 3, not to 2 patients. And the argument of having that it's difficult to find patients is not an argument for reducing our quality of care. We need to provide this important procedure to as many people as we can, and we need to do it well. So we would prefer that you not reduce this requirement down to 2. It also doesn't make any sense, the very last statement of only allowing no more than 4 applications on any required patients doesn't make any sense. Why couldn't we do more than 4 on a patient? If a patient needed 5 or 6 sealants, why can't we do more than 4 on a patient? So that entire line there should be removed.
I also wanted to refer the lawyers to the Coda Standards, which is Standard 210. And within that standard, it says there's no hourly requirements for sealants or number of patients. What it says is that, the program curriculum must include content at the level, depth, and scope required by the state. So the state is actually setting the standard, whether it's going to be didactic laboratory, or clinical simulation.
I would concur with KF's recommendation. Claudia Pohl, CDAA, we would concur with their recommendation.
That's it? That's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
So with that, I think, are we going to vote to accept that, all of the council's? Do we need to vote? Are we done?
We're-
Comment.
I'm not sure.
Can I comment on this or not? Can we comment on those, Karen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that this is an opportunity for the joint committee to comment on the comments that were made.
Right.
And you don't have to necessarily change what you already suggested, but if you would like to discuss the things that were brought up, feel free, this is the time to do it. Because what we're hoping to do is sign off on this language. This essentially will be the language that would go forward to the May meeting for the board to initiate the rulemaking, and it will include the forms and applications that didn't make it here. So if we can sort of iron out some of these things now's the time to do that. It would be helpful for staff. Gabe and Danny, did you have any questions about the comments that were made?
I do not.
I mean, some of the issues we've gone back and forth on, and so, yes, please feel free to comment.
Well, I just remember last time Dr. Witcher even mentioned, just because the state regs are this doesn't mean the programs can't do what you feel your students need. If the students need or your program needs to do one more patient, by all means do 3 and 4 patients, but the regs can say 2.
Yeah, I would concur with Cindy. I think the 2 patients is adequate for our dental assistants to be completing, and that.
Can you reference which one now we're talking about?
So
I'm
we're
sorry,
on
'cause
Page 95.
95.
95. It's this Pitt and Fisher.
And in November, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, we went and recommended to staff 1 patient. Staff came back today to discuss, and it was recommended by staff 2 patients. Stakeholders have recommended for us to go back to original language of 4 patients. As a DAC, do we concur that 2 patients is adequate?
I concur. I agree it is.
Okay.
Were there any of the other comments that you'd like to discuss further?
Cindy, do you want to revisit the infection control and the exam prior? What are our thoughts there after hearing stakeholders' feedback?
And again, Rose, can you
Sorry.
tell?
Yes.
Right. And I understand, and I am taken into account. I understand that some of the programs, some of the schools, but if we require a DA coming in off the street to take an 8-hour course with a written exam at the end, and yes, there are, in a program, they are concurrent. There are concurrent courses, they're doing skills, but it's not just an exam that they're doing. They've been able to skill off. They've been able to make sure they've finished these understanding of what infection control is. And so having just the written exam, that's not what this is all about. It's about also them understanding they've done the 8-hour course. They've finished this to be able to work into patient-based things. It's the patient safety as well. It's not just the program that we need to worry about.
I'd like to add to that. It's also the student safety, not so much the patient, but it's everybody's safety that's involved in the clinical setting while training.
And we're not saying your program can't do it, but just, well, we are. But what I mean is that lost my train of thought, but we're talking about patient care. This is clinic classes. When are the clinic classes done? This is for an RDA program approved by the state. A clinic class is patient-based. We're not talking about when they do their skills or their labs or with skill-offs. They need to have a course completed by the time they see patients. We make them do other things for other clinic classes, so this infection control is huge.
Okay, so we're going to go with the rejection of the staff comment
Yes.
as we did in the meeting. Is that, everybody concurs?
Yes.
All right.
And then just one more item that stakeholders mentioned, going back to the sealants on page 95. What I interpreted from stakeholders was on line 18 of 95, it says no more than 4 applications on any of the required live patients. And a suggestion was made that if they are able or capable to provide an additional sealant, should there be language around that? Cindy, what are your thoughts? Do we want to
Yes,
adjust
that could be changed. We could change that.
So that would be to remove that
Well-
limitation?
Yeah, I think we remove it because.
Yeah, if we just remove it, then
you.
you're not
Not
completely
limited.
left, limited to that.
All right, we will implement that. All right, any other comments?
Okay, so that was a great discussion. Thanks to you all for your hard work. It looks like this is actually going to be moving. We'll take a vote today, full board and DAC, on accepting this language and moving it forward to the full board for initiation. Sarah, I don't know that we had that initiation language in the packet.
Good morning, Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. So today we are hoping that the board and the Dental Assistant Council will adopt or approve this final draft language. The next step would be to take this back to the office, finalize the forms that will accompany this rulemaking package. It will then go to the board at the May meeting for initiation of the rulemaking. So today we're looking for merely a motion to approve this language to incorporate into the forms. And then at the May meeting, we will do the initiation. At that time, then we will work through that initiation process where we have to get the approval through the department, agency, file with OAL, and there will be plenty of opportunity for additional public comment along the way.
And just for further clarification for stakeholders, so once this actually goes forward and we post or notice the 45-day comment period, there are still additional opportunity for you to plead your case, if you will, again, during a certain period of time, and the staff and board and DAC will have to respond to those comments. So this is just start launching the project, if you will.
Yes, any stakeholders who are interested in following along with the process, I would recommend signing up for our email distribution list on our website. The notification of the postings will be sent out through that email distribution list, and that will provide the instructions for the opportunities to participate in that public comment period as well.
No, they approved the language. They're going to adopt it and they're going to initiate it.
So the vote?
Yeah.
The vote is to approve the language.
This is kind of a unique situation, so we just want to make sure we do everything right. Are we going to have the DAC vote and then the board vote? So do we need two separate motions?
It seems to me if the board's going to take up and approve the language at the May meeting, that today all you need is a motion and a vote of the DAC to move the language to the board.
I like it.
If that's
Okay.
if that's the pleasure of the DAC and the board in the general meeting.
Okay.
So we just need a second, right?
I second that. Casares.
Okay. So Cazares.
Yes.
Contreras absent. Olagi. Yes. Ovard, yes. Pacheco. Okay, it has passed.
Congratulations, everybody. This is a good sign, and huge kudos to these two sitting at the table here for having jumped in and taken a master's course in dental assisting educating requirements. So thank you both very much. Well done.
And if I might briefly echo that, this is the first opportunity the board's had to meet Ms. Rogers and experience the regulations team. What they've done here is well beyond what one lowly board counsel could have done in a brief period of time. So you're seeing some of the benefits of that here today.
I think we're moving on now to item number 3, the updates on, first on the new dental assisting program and course applications.
Tina Valerie, manager of the Dental Assisting Unit. I will be presenting the update on new dental assisting program and course applications. This memo provides an overview of the new dental assisting program and course applications received by the board. Table 1 shows the total number of program and course applications that have been approved in 2019. Table 2 shows the number of RDA and RDA-EF program site visits conducted in 2019. Table 3 is an overview of the status of each application received. Table 4 shows the total number of approved programs and courses. And Table 5 identifies the approved programs and courses by name and type of program. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So we're on page 211 of the entire document.
Public comment? Seeing none? Can you take us through number 4?
Yes. Agenda item 4 is an update on the RDA program reevaluations and overview of the reevaluation process. This memo is an overview of the reevaluations being conducted by the board and the status of each reevaluation. There is also a brief overview of the reevaluation process and our efforts to improve communication with stakeholders and our plans to improve the process moving forward. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Public comment? Seeing none?
Tina, before you start,
Yes.
just to let board and council know, we're going through a major switch over to ensure that all of the documents that we post on our website are ADA compliant. And so all the information you're seeing now could possibly change. Essentially, anything that we put on the website has to be read or readable, if you will. So a lot of this, the way we've presented this information in chart form, may be revised. So it's likely that you could see very different reports coming in May. We're still in the process of trying to get staff trained up on that, and we'll just keep you posted along the way. So go ahead, Tina.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is an update on dental assisting examination statistics. The board currently offers 4 written examinations: the RDA Combined General Written and Law and Ethics exam, the RDA EF Written, the Orthodontic Assistant Permit Written, and the Dental Sedation Assistant Permit Written exam. This memo provides an overview of the candidates that have been tested over the last 12 months and the passing and failing scores for each exam. The tables provide a breakdown of each examination by first-time and repeat candidates and their passing and failing scores. The board also offers the RDA-EF clinical and practical examinations, which were offered in February, March, June, August, October, and November of 2019 in both Northern and Southern California. A breakdown of each exam has been included. Also included in your materials are numerous pages of statistics that show the passing rates for each individual approved program. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Question? How is the fees regulated for applicants that want to take the exam? Is it by do we regulate that, or is it the exam center? Just to make sure that the costs are affordable to the applicants, how do we know how much they're going to charge them?
So, Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. There's different variations of the fees. When an applicant applies, they pay an application fee to the board. And then for the purpose of the RDA-EF examination, the practical and clinical examination that we administer, there is an application fee associated with that that's paid to the board. Those fees were set by the fee increase that we completed a few years ago. But the fees that are assessed by PSI, which is the testing vendor, those are assessed by PSI, and that's in regulation that it should be the cost of administering the exam. I believe they range from $23 to $38 per test administration.
Yeah, just want to make sure it didn't stop people from taking the exam if it was too expensive for them, that's all. I just didn't know how much the actual fee is and how that was determined. Okay, thank you.
Agenda item 6 is an update on dental assisting licensing statistics. The board currently licenses RDAs, RDA-EFs, OAs, and DSAs in the dental assisting unit. This memo provides an overview of the current and active, current and inactive, delinquent, and canceled licenses. This item also provides the delinquent license aging, a breakdown of licensees per county, and the ratio of RDAs to DDSs licensed within those counties. Beginning on page 4 of this memo, there are tables indicating the number of applications received by the board in 2019, as well as those that have been approved, the number of licenses that have been issued, along with the applications that have been canceled, withdrawn, and denied. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Burton.
Tina, I think we've talked about this before. Some of the numbers between the RDAs and the DDSs is disproportionate. Is this the number of RDAs reflect where they practice or where they live?
So this would be the address that they're reporting as their address of record. So it's hard to say with RDAs which one they're reporting, but it should be, I would assume, close in the proximity, but it's whatever address of record they have on file with us.
Seven? Yeah. Public comment on items not on the agenda? Seeing none. Future agenda items? Okay. Number 9, board and council member comments on items not on the agenda. Dr. Morrow.
Joint meeting, I have a question that I hope somebody can help me with an answer, and if it's an inappropriate question, I'm sure that our attorney will stifle me, let's put it that way. At the present time, it appears that in the state of California anyway, the only dental license that is obtained through the California Dental Board that isn't through a Coda-approved educational program is dental assisting. And it seems like that since the Commission on Dental Accreditation has standards, educational standards for dental assisting, my question is, why haven't we moved to adopt the Coda Standards for meeting requirements for educational and clinical training for registered dental assistants? I know we still have the I call it a preceptorship training, which is trained by the dentist. Dentistry did away with that back in the 1800s. Dental hygiene is Coda approved and dentistry is Coda approved. So have there ever been any discussion, since I've been a member of this board, which is 11 years now, 10 years now, I have never heard a discussion regarding why is California still going through all of this effort, time, and energy to establish these standards when Coda has them and we have adopted every other standard that Coda has for dentistry.
Do these comments go to the, because we're on the section of items not on the agenda. If they go to the rulemaking that we were previously looking at, I think we could go back to that item on the agenda. If not, I do think we would need to place that on an agenda for either a future DAC meeting or a future board meeting, before we can get into a discussion about that issue. But that's where we are here, so. Not inappropriate, but it's more appropriate as a agenda item for a future meeting, and I see your executive officer making a note of that.
Okay.
Say that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Dr. Stewart, on a different subject, Dental Assistant Recognition Week is 2 days away and counting, so I just wanted to give a few words, if that's okay, to our dental assistants, not only in California, but across the country. So as a member of the Dental Assisting Council and the Dental Board, 2 days we have countdown to Dental Assistant Recognition Week. I want to thank dental assistants in California and across the country for your dedication to our profession. As dental assistants, we share a passion for delivering a patient-centric care to the communities we serve. We are committed to growing in our roles, both personally and professionally. By asking questions and helping patients identify what is important to them, we have the ability to support clinicians in delivering the best dentistry to each and every patient. We are skilled in establishing trust by actively listening to questions and concerns, which helps patients accept treatment. A big thank you to your commitment to clinical excellence. You are truly appreciated by team members and patients. Take the time to celebrate the profession of dental assisting next week, March 1st through March 7th, showing gratitude to all past and present dental assistants. Thank you.
Further comments? All right. So are there further board or council member comments on the items not on the agenda? Do we need to? So we're going to adjourn the joint meeting of the DAC and the board. And we're going to return to open session for the Dental Board of California. What do you want to do?
Pahua, if we broke for lunch, is the restaurant ready?
I told them lunch was available at 12, or we would be finished at 12.
Okay, then I would recommend, after lunch, Mr. Sahni from the Attorney General's office will be here and will be our speaker. And he's going to be here about 1:15-ish, 1:30. So I would recommend perhaps we go through item 9, item 10. And so then after Mr. Sahni's presentation this afternoon, we could go into closed session earlier. And if that's the will of the board. So at this point, we would take on item number 9, enforcement. You good with that?
I'm good with that, thank you.
So we're going to be going to page 265 in the meeting materials for the enforcement report.
Good morning, Carlos Alvarez, Enforcement Chief, and I will present agenda item number 9, the review of enforcement statistics and trends. And then probably you noticed that there was a difference in our agenda item where our bars and graphs were removed, and that was just that we're moving towards to being ADA compliant. And therefore, we're still moving forward with training as well, so we could be in compliance with ADA. So that's why these bars and graphs were removed. And also, as before I start, just that the managers, the administration, we've been striving to provide good, accurate numbers to present to the board. And as we started the audits and the processing, streamlining with the units and enforcement with CCU, a tracker was developed, and we kind of, as we've been moving forward, it's kind of been proven that this tracker actually keeps statistics and timelines of our cases, open cases, closed cases. And then as it moved on, it went into the investigative analysis unit. And therefore, the tracker was also developed for that unit, and it's kind of, again, it's showing that this is kind of proven to report accurate numbers. And we also been working with our BREEZE system as well as to what codes work better for us to report, timelines and statistics. So we also been working with that as well. So with the managers and the administration, we've been working to strive to present accurate numbers here. So as we move on in the future, like I said, we'll be able to present accurate numbers here. And so I want to start off with the complaint and compliance unit for quarter 2, which was between August 1st, 2019 and December 31st of 2019. Complaints received are 936 cases that CCU has received. And the complaints received have decreased by approximately 165 cases from the first quarter of the fiscal year of 2019 and 20. So the monthly average of complaints received for quarter 2 was 312. Then complaint cases open in CCU as of February 14th of 2020 is 669 cases. And as you we reach down as the complaint aging. If you see the 1-year mark, we have 0 files in that unit, which is remarkable. And that's, I guess, once I started, that was one of the goals that we were trying to do, was to remove that 1 year, all those files that were in that 1 year category. And it's great that we were able to accomplish that. And we were able to accomplish it because we started getting a little bit more strict, I would say, with the ordering of the records, because we started looking into why it was taking so long, and we started looking on the files, and it was kind of, we're giving licensees, 2 opportunities, 3 opportunities for them to provide records when, with the statutes, it's actually, they have to provide records to us within 15 days. So we're kind of allowing them to, to get away with the 15 days. So now what we're doing is we're issuing citations now, and if they still don't comply with the citations, they're still not providing records to us, then we're moving forward to subpoenas. And the subpoenas have been working well for them to produce records. And as you see also for the 6 to 12 months category, that's very low as well. That's 17 files, which is remarkable. And hopefully as we move forward to our next meeting, we'll see zeros on that category as well. So as we move complaint cases that have been closed in the complaint and compliance unit between October 1st, 2019 and December 31st of 2019, it's 689 cases that had been closed. Now, the termination to close those cases is when we move those files to a dental consultant. They review the cases, they come back, they give their opinion that there was no errors in the treatment. So therefore, or if they find just a single act of negligence is not something that we will move forward with an accusation. It's just simple act of negligence, so that case is closed. So, like I said, so who makes the determination on that is the dental consultant. So we use that. So automatically, staff doesn't close out their cases on their own. So currently, right now, we'll move into cases at investigations, and currently, right now, as of February 14th, number of subsequent arrest reports, what we call SARS. We have 238 cases, and what those SARS is subsequent arrest reports when we get notifications from Department of Justice that a licensee has been arrested, or we also get notified when a licensee gets convicted, and so therefore we automatically open up an investigations so we could formally start looking into the criminal arrest. And so currently right now what we do is once we've received that SAR, we start ordering records from the court system. And as you see here, we have, category of 1 year plus. And so for there with those 1 year plus, we're waiting for those cases to get adjudicated. So it could take anywhere from 1 year to 3 years for a case to be adjudicated, meaning whether they were found, licensee was found guilty, not guilty, or they pled to any of the criminal charges. And so what we do is we then, once we have that conviction, we get that notification, we reach out to the licensees, we get information as to why an arrest was made. We get information as what they have done to correct their behavior as far as them going into rehab. And that, on a case-by-case basis, we'll issue a citation for them not reporting the conviction, or the more serious cases, we'll move that to the Attorney General's office for an accusation. And then on the most serious subsequent arrest cases that we have, the most serious, we automatically move those to the enforcement unit for sworn investigators to work on. So we won't forward them to our investigative analysis to collect records. We'll automatically move those to sworn so they could work with the arresting agency, work with the district attorney's office because of the seriousness of the case.
Can I interrupt you and ask you a question?
Sure.
For a dentist to be in his office practicing and two sworn officers walk through the front door and go up to the front desk and say, is Dr. Smith available? We need a lot of work, I think, has gone on before that event happens. Could you give me an idea of what takes place before our officers would go into an office and need to talk to or meet with that particular dentist?
Sure. So before we actually walk into a dental office to speak with the licensee, we gather all the facts. We want to know all the facts to the case. So meaning that we already had talked to the complainant, we talked already to any witnesses. If there's any agencies that are involved, we will talk to them. If there's documents to collect, we will collect those documents, review it. Then at that time, the investigators start formulating a plan and start formulating their questions to the licensee. So we're already going in prepared already with what questions we're going to ask, and we already know the facts of the case. Then at that time, we walk in because we already know the facts of the case, and now we just want to gather their statements in order for us to get an overall understanding as to why a complaint came in, as to why a certain aspect of the complaint, why it was done. So we give them the opportunity to provide statements and to clarify any issues. So, and then we'll move on to number of investigative cases open in the Investigative Analysis Unit, what we call IAU. And as of February 14th of 2020, we have 365 open cases. So those 365 cases we're working on. And as you can see, again, with the 3 years mark that we have, like I said, we've been working really hard not to have cases in that category, as because some of our statute of limitations expire at 3 years. So we've been doing really good to make that priority. And so for the number of investigative cases open in Sacramento and the Orangeville office, that's with the sworn investigators. As of February 14th of 2020, we have 602 cases. And as you can see on the 3-year category again, we're very low in that quarter. We're at 8. And so some of those cases that we're at 3 years plus is usually it's with the fraud cases. Those take long to investigate, and so therefore a lot of times with the Business and Professions Code, there's no statute of limitations on fraud. So that gives us the opportunity to carefully investigate those type of cases. So the number of investigations closed between October 1st in 2019 and December 31st of 2019 were 186 cases, and that's all a combination of the IE unit, Sacramento, and the Orangeville offices. And so currently right now we have 46 open inspections for Sacramento and Orangeville offices. So those are the type of complaints that we receive for unsafe, unsanitary conditions of a dental office, and we send our inspectors to conduct an investigation there. So now moving forward to the administrative and disciplinary actions. So there was a total of 63 citations that were issued for quarter 2, October 1st, 2019, and December 31st of 2019. And the reason that's high is because with the licensing unit conducting the CD audits to see if the licensees are meeting the requirements, and if they're not meeting the requirements, then citations are being issued. So that's why the numbers are so high in that category. And then with a total of 12 accusations were filed with the Attorney General's office between quarter 2. And then there was 14 cases that were transmitted to the Attorney General's office for quarter 2, is where we complete an investigation and we forward that to the Attorney General's office to request an accusation.
I just want to add something here. So the total number of accusations filed, there's 12, and that means the filing date is when I sign it. And that, compare that number then to the next line, the total, there were 14 cases that were actually transmitted to the AG's office. The pleading hasn't been written up yet. So that's where the difference is in those numbers.
So then as of February 14th of 2020, we have 123 cases that are pending at the Attorney General's office currently right now. And now we will move into the number of probationers. So those are active probationers with the board. We have 191 probationers, and we have probationers who are on tolling status, which are 22. And so what that means is with a licensee that stops and ceases to practice in the state of California, they move to another state, and while they're at another state, their time away from California does not count towards the reduction of their probation terms. So let's just say they're on the 3-year term, they complete 1 year, they decide to move to another state, and they come back, let's say after 4 years, they come back, then their time starts again. Once they notify their probation monitor that they're back in the state, then their time starts again, and then they still owe the board another 2 years. So anytime that they're away from the state of California, their time does not count towards probation. And so with the 22 probationers that we're tolling, from the last meeting, I gathered all the files to all the tollers. And so I started reviewing them to see why they had been tolling. And I kind of, some of the files there, one of them has been tolling since 1995. And so it goes from 1995 into 2000, all the way up to 2010. And then at that time, I started trying to review the disciplinary guidelines from the oldest case from 1995, but I couldn't find any guidelines for that. So I had to go off our 2010 guidelines, disciplinary guidelines, and to see, yes.
Are they still paying their fees?
No, so there's no, and
I mean, the
ones,
licensing fees. Since they're on probation, they still have to keep a valid license. So are they still paying?
So when I was reviewing, some are paying, but that's not in their terms. So function as a licensee, it was not part of any of their terms. And from the 1995, any of the older cases, it was not in there. So functions, so when I was looking at the 2010 disciplinary guidelines and looking at the oldest, or the newest probation terms, it has function of a licensee. So therefore, function of a licensee is a licensee has to work either a minimum of 16 hours per week or 64 hours per calendar month. So that's new. That was new in 2010. And also with the function of the licensee, it added a timeline now, because it added the timeline. If they're away from the state of California and they cease to practice for 5 years, so if they're away from the state for 5 years, their license automatically cancels. And all of these older cases, that's not in their terms. So that's why they've been able to continue to be on the tolling status, because there is no timeline.
So is there a way for us to know that prior, just like we're reviewing licenses for people, for people that renew canceled ones? Would that ever come to pass where we would have to review that in that way?
Yeah, so so all these, what we're gathering with all the 22 that we have, we met the administration, the managers we met, and so what we're doing is we're preparing a detailed report for each of the probationers, each of their conditions, how long they've been on probation. And so once we have this report prepared, we're going to meet with our Attorney General liaison to see how we can correct this, and if and how we could remove some of these probationers from this tolling status.
Is that information shared with other states they possibly could be working in?
No, not. The only information that we would get if they're actively working in another state and they're disciplined, then we will get notified. But again, it's just they're away from the state, they're on that tolling status. So if we do get notification, then yes, we could actually move forward for a probation violation.
Carlos, didn't you find that the 22 tolling, don't most of them have active licenses still? So they have been
yes,
paying
and I'm sorry,
licensing
yes,
fees.
correct. And they've been paying licensing fees. They've been current with their license fees, but they just haven't been in the state. They just keep renewing. And so that's why I feel that functional licensee condition number 11 kind of helps us because it identifies timelines for us.
Dr. Chan has a question, and then Dr. Morrow.
And the question was, if they move to another state, they're still tolling. Is that still on the data bank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Carlos, this is a question not related to tolling, but it's related to complaints and investigations.
Okay.
When you receive a complaint, who decides and how is the decision made regarding whether an investigation is warranted based on that complaint?
So once we collect all the records, we collect records from the subject. We collect records if there's any subsequent treaters, and then we move that forward to a dental consultant. So a dental consultant reviews the case. They form an opinion that it warrants further investigation, and that's what causes that complaint to move forward to either to the IA unit or to the enforcement unit.
Okay, as an example, let's say the complaint was regarding lack of proper infection control. What kind of documentation would you seek from the complainant as well as from the dentist whose license was being complained?
No, you're referring to unsanitary conditions, is that? So with that, the complaint will, usually the complaint comes in, if it's unsanitary conditions, it will say that they observed that there was dirty tools, there was dirt all over the instruments. And so that what we do is there's a checklist that the investigators or the inspector has with the minimum requirements of 1005 of the California Code of Regulations. So we have a checklist. They go in, they contact the dentist. So either he would walk through the office with the investigator or with the inspector, or either they would designate someone from the office to walk around a checklist. Then at the end, we'll meet with the licensee and tell them everything, the categories where they failed to meet, where it was unsanitary. Then we'll give them 30 days to correct. Yeah.
Excellent. Ms. Burton.
Number one, on the case aging.
Yes.
The 1 or more years getting to 0, that's big. That is really big. And so I congratulate all of you for that. That's been a major issue for a long time. The second thing is on the bottom of page 267, the number of probationers.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I'm understanding the third one, the people who are in the investigation analysis unit. Are these people who had already been on probation and
these are
maybe not complying?
So all these are active probationers, and they're each unit. So Sacramento has 37 active probationers, and the Orange office has 112, and the investigative analysis unit has 42 active. So meaning that they're in the state, they're active, and they're complying, and we're monitoring them.
But I'm not understanding who the 42 are as compared to the active probationers who...
So those are licensees, so they're either dentists or they're RDAs, or they could be either RDAs and extended functions. Those are the licensees that we're monitoring or who are on probation.
I think the question is, why are they attached to the investigative analysis unit? That's what we're trying to understand.
Yes.
Okay, so, well, we separate all the cases, so we review all the cases. So really, whether they're an inspector, whether they're non-sworn or sworn, their duties is to have probation monitoring. So really, there isn't a difference on that. So if it's an investigative analysis unit, they conducted an investigation, it's within their unit, then they will get that probationer within that unit. If it's in Southern California, all cases from Southern California, all the probationers are sent to the orange office. So really, there's no difference between what type of probationer each unit gets.
But I still don't understand who those 42 active ones are and why they're not just in the Orange office or the Sacramento office. How are they distinguished between those who are already assigned to an office?
Yeah, so all these are assigned to each individual office. And like I said, so all probationers who are on probation in Southern California, we send those to Southern California because they're able to better monitor them in Southern California, opposed if we were in Northern California, because they would have to travel. They would have to travel and meet with the probationers.
I think I get that part. I get why people are in those two offices, but I don't get why the 42 are in a separate unit. What makes them in a separate unit?
So we separate everything. So what we do is, so therefore for the enforcement, for the sworn, not to just have probationers and to be, because again, they're working with open cases, they're working with probationers. So in order to make it equal in all the units, we separate them. And so therefore, each individual unit has probation monitoring.
Well,
So
there's 2 units in Sacramento that do investigations. Our IAU unit, they have their own cases and do their own investigations, and the sworn have their cases.
Okay.
So the 42 in the investigative unit are cases that the investigative unit likely investigated and put forth to the Attorney General's office. So our cases aren't just...
pending in some way?
Pardon me?
Are they pending in some way?
No, we have 2 units in Sacramento that do investigations, the sworn and the non-sworn.
Right.
And so these 3 bullets represent all the people who do investigations. So in
Okay.
Sacramento, we have 2 units that do it, but the Orange office does not have an investigative analysis unit. Got it now? Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. And so what's the ratio of staff to probationers for each office?
So right now, if we do the ratio, it's about 10 each. That's the ratio. But like I said, it's a little bit higher, obviously, in the Orange office because,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Dr. Chan.
First of all, Carlos, I think I was the one that asked to do the graphs and the trend lines because things jump out. That's the way I was trained to see metrics. And you can see the trends rather than absolute numbers. But I do understand if we have to be compliant.
Well, we have to be compliant with what we post on our website, so I guess we could conceivably send board members the graphs. It says the same thing that we're going to have to say in narrative and numbers. So we could include perhaps the graphs. We'll have to check with legal to make sure that we can do that.
If there's any more questions, we'll move to agenda item number 10.
Dr. Laren.
Hi, thank you. A while ago, you mentioned that an active dentist has to have work 16 hours a week, correct?
The minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if a dentist moves out of state or a dentist that is here in the state is not working 16 hours, are they forced to change their status? Or like the ones that we're towing, I mean, how do we know that they're working, do they have to work 16 hours anywhere or is it in the state or how does that work?
So with the in-state, they're supposed to work the minimum of the 16 hours.
They're supposed to?
Yeah, they're supposed to, because the conditions say they shall work the minimum of a week. And so what it is, the rationale is with that is that it gives the board the opportunity to monitor them and that they're actually functioning within their license category, and they're being proficient in that, and that's the rationale between them working the minimum hours. And so what we do is we actually meet with them. The quarterly reports actually says in there that if they're working in the field and how many hours they're working on. So like I said, we verify it by actually going to the dental office where they're claiming to be working. So that way we know for sure that they're in compliance.
So there's no restriction for dentists that are not under some license restriction?
So that's either, so that's either a license or RDA or anybody, any category, they're supposed to be working. And so what that is the rationale, again, is that we're able to determine whether they can perform the functions and duties of their license in that category.
Okay.
But like I said, but we do it is they have to write to us under perjury. You know, they have to say that, yes, everything that reporting to us is true and accurate. And then we verify it with the office that they're working at as well, that they're being compliant with that, with those terms.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll move forward to agenda item number 10, substance abuse awareness.
Carlos, excuse me,
yeah,
I'm sorry. A public comment before we move on? Thank you.
So we'll move forward to the diversion program report and statistics. So as of December, we have 10 active participants in the diversion program. And so in October, we had 2 cases that were closed. And so November and December, currently right now, we have 10 active participants in diversion. And so the next meeting, diversion meeting, is scheduled for April the 15th of 2020.
So it seems like that number's going lower and lower. So are we not using diversion as much? I know we just renewed the contract with Maximus. So I'm wondering, is there ever going to be a point where we don't use that anymore since it's dropping? In 6 years, I've seen either stays the same or it drops. So how does one get put on the into this program? And how does one get off of it? And do we see future need for it?
Yeah, so one is a licensee could automatically on their own volunteer to get into the diversion program. So again, if we do an investigation that involves some type of alcohol or drugs and they choose to go into diversion, that's one way for them to get in. The other way to get in is part of their probation. Again, their probation terms that they have to get into diversion. So then they're evaluated by the diversion committee to determine whether they're a good candidate to enter, or they're fine as it is being monitored, let's just say by probation with the county, whatever they're attached to.
So does Maximus have the final say if they get off? Or do we look at it as a board, or do you guys look at it? I mean, I could see where if Maximus was getting X amount of dollars, they would want people in the program longer or always keep them in that program. So when do they graduate from that program? Or if they do?
Oh, it's a 5-year program. And so they're evaluated a couple of times a year by our diversion evaluation committees, the DECs. And you know that Dr. Vixie has come and given his testimony. He's actively involved in that. Though I understand that at their last meeting, they were concerned that the numbers were dropping, which does not indicate that the problem has gone away. But we don't know why the numbers are dropping. So that's something that the board could probably take up in the future to discuss. So we get charged per participant. So you're right in that it would be difficult for Maximus to determine what they're going to, the intake they're going to, the money they're going to receive, because if we don't have the people, then they don't get that money. When we started in the program over 5 years ago, I think at our highest we had 80-something participants at the time. So we have not really been able to determine what has changed in that. People have said somehow the introduction of uniform standards has changed and things are maybe a little harsher than they used to be, but that hasn't been proven yet. So we will be looking into that as we move forward to determine, essentially to try to determine what's going on. We do, when people, through these subsequent arrest records, as Carlos had mentioned, when we get notification of DUIs and things like that, we send out brochures to these people and let them know that a program is available. But aside from that, people, if they know we're doing an investigation, may voluntarily go into diversion to try to seek help. The diversion program has the medical ability to evaluate whether somebody should or could be in the program. So staff just monitors when we get, say, a lab report on somebody in the diversion program. We monitor whether or not they're in compliance with the probation and what's going on. But we rely on the medical professionals to make the call as to whether or not it's working. We do have people that self-refer into the program. They go through an evaluation to see whether the program is going to accept them. And sometimes the program accepts them and sometimes the program doesn't. And even after they've gone through the evaluation and are accepted, we find in some cases that they just can't seem to comply with the terms of the diversion program. So it's a tough problem. As I said, I'd like to think that we're making a dent in trying to assist people with this disease, but I don't necessarily know that that's the case. CDA has a wellness program. I haven't asked them recently how many people they have in their program. It's very different from our program. And as Dr. Vixie has come to the board in the past and explained how all that works. So we can put it on for a future agenda item to bring information back at a future meeting and to discuss this. I mean, I think it's an issue that could easily be discussed regularly just to make sure people are up on what's going on.
Yeah, I just feel that it doesn't look like it's changed. I don't know if we can, being that California has so many people,
right?
That number should go up, I think. It just didn't seem like.
Well, this is anecdotal, but I think that licensees are afraid if they come to the board, if they voluntarily come to the board and want to try to get help, their license is on the line. So, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of factors to be considered in this. But the diversion program has also expressed concern recently, so perhaps we'll put some program together where we can come and start to talk about that. Okay.
Ms. Burton.
I recall, and this is a question to the executive officer, recall once before we had a discussion about cost, and that the amount that the participant was paying was low compared to what the state was providing. And if I'm correct, and we were going to look at whether there were ways that we could charge the participant more so that the program pays for itself differently.
Well, there are currently, I believe, 8 boards that utilize, it's now called the recovery program rather than the diversion program, and many boards have gone to requiring the participants to pay the full cost of the program themselves. Our board still subsidizes our participants. So our participants, I'm going to pull the number out of the air. In the past, it had been 300 something a month, and the participants only pay 100, and the board pays the rest. But we only pay if participants are in the program. So if that seems, I mean, that could be discussed at a future meeting, whether the board wants to. The board has felt strongly in the past that they wanted to have assistance given to dentists and RDAs and try to encourage them to be in this program. And so they have felt strongly about that, about subsidizing. Though it seems to me that at last discussion, not many boards do that much anymore, the subsidizing part. So it's something that could be put on a future agenda for discussion.
Okay. And then do we know, of the 10 people in the program, how many self-reported absent a complaint, and the number of people who got there because of disciplinary action?
We could bring that back to a future meeting.
Okay.
Actually, Karen answered part of it about the cost, and we can extrapolate that out to the numbers of people, but a couple of things. First of all, the testimony from Dr. Vinci was very, very, very compelling. So we see that the problem is out there. But then we're using also staff resources as well as monetary resources to support that. And with the dwindling number, it's counterintuitive, like Ross says. It doesn't make sense. So the question that comes for that future agenda would be, what's our return on investment in what we're doing? And is there another way of approaching that might be a more contemporary look at doing it and getting a better, again, return on investment? And we're investing in people. Thank you.
Further comments? Public comment? Okay.
We'll move forward to agenda item number 10. It's with the update on Cures report. And for quarter two, we had 104 new licensees that have registered with Cures. So in October, we had 15,471. So as of December 2019, we have 15,575. So we still have licensees that are still registering with Cures, which is good that everybody knows about Cures. So we're, like I said, an increase of 104. Then with the Cures usage, as of December 31st, number of searches. So on October, we had 7,124. November, we had 5,715, and December, 5,601. So we actually have licensees who are actually conducting searches before prescribing any opioids. And the times that the system was accessed for October 2019 was 4,509. November 2019, 4,179. And this December 2019, 4,714. And then actually the licensees who actually need help on the Cure systems for any questions that they need, any questions whether to how to log on, they actually been using the help desk. So in October we had 132 calls to the help desk, November 124, and December 105. Then below, we have the number of prescriptions that were filled, schedules 2 through 5, and that's kind of fluctuated through quarter two. And so since we're kind of on this topic on opioids, our next statewide opioid safety work group meeting is scheduled for March 27th, 2020. I'm still continuing to attend those meetings.
Okay. Any further questions of Carlos? We'll be back for, let's go to lunch and get back at 1:15. Thank you very much. Acknowledge our friend Greg Salute, who's with us in the room this afternoon. Nice to see you, Greg. Thank you. And Carl Sahni is with us to make a presentation. We're excited to hear what you have to share with us, Carl. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to help us understand your role and so forth.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, my name is Carl Sahni. I am the successor to Linda Schneider, who I believe appeared here perhaps about a year or so ago. I have practiced law for 35 years. Before coming to the Department of Justice about 13 years ago, I was most recently a general counsel of a telecommunications company, and before that, the deputy. And then I spent about 15, 20 years in private practice as a partner in 2 national law firms specializing in complex commercial litigation, mergers and acquisitions, and environmental law was kind of my background. But I only say that to contrast the last 13 years. So I would say, and I've said this to several people, that the last 13 years have been the most soul-satisfying period of my career, the time when, as a public servant, you can do more for the overall benefit of California consumers than I could in any capacity that I had before then. I was, until recently, the liaison to another board, the Board of Accountancy, for about 8 years. And during that period, I came to learn and appreciate the dedication of all the board members who served on that board. And I've come to learn that that is a generic attribute of all board members, that they serve, I think I can safely say, not to make money here, given your very modest per diems, but to give back to the public for all the things that perhaps your career has done for you in other walks of life. And so it's really an honor to be surrounded by people who have dedicated their time and energy to the protection of the public in the capacity as board members of the dental board. I have been asked to speak on the report that our office produces annually. We call it the 312.2 report under the Business and Professions Code number. And that report will have a lot of data, and I'm hoping to go through it swiftly and not bore you too much, but explain a little bit about what data has been collected.
So Carl, if you're ready to go, I'm going to suggest to the board that we might want to go out into the audience so that we can see the presentation and then not be blinded by the light as well. So thank you. Give us just 1 minute to relocate, and then when you're ready.
Great. Thank you.
Don't run towards the light.
Do you mind if we stay here?
So the report that I am going to review with you, I'm going to go over the background a little bit, the data collection process, the agencies involved, and the dental board. I felt like I was in ET there for a second. And so the genesis of this report goes back about 5 years to 2015, when the legislature was examining how efficiently all the boards that issue licenses were processing their disciplinary cases throughout the state of California. I think there have been some concerns that there wasn't a lot of visibility to the legislature as to whether the cases were moving swiftly or slowly through the disciplinary process. And so this report was generated in order to create a bunch of benchmarks that would allow the legislature over a period of time to evaluate how our cases are being handled. So the very first report was for the 2018 report, collecting 2016 and 2017 data. And then the second report was last year. And then the current report that I think has been distributed to you is for the fiscal year ending in June 30th of last year. So one thing you have to kind of bear in mind is that even though the report gets published on January 1, it is only looking at data from the period of the June 30th of the previous year to July 1st of the year before that. So it takes about 6 months for us to kind of collect, validate, and analyze the data that we've collected. There are about 37 agencies that we are reporting on. The work of this report is done both by our licensing section, of which I'm the senior assistant, as well as by the health quality enforcement section, which is our sister section, and they are the section that oversees the medical board and the psychology board and other healthcare boards. We collect the data by a computer system called our ProLaw system, and in the ProLaw system, every time we come up to certain events in the handling of a case, they get electronically docketed in the case diary. And that case diary data then can be absorbed into our whole system. We can run reports based on all of the cases that are being handled by our office in order to validate and to identify what periods of time happen between various docketing events. So just kind of looking generally at how many or what these reports show between this year and last year is this overall summary of all of our cases. It shows that there was a 5% increase in accusations from last year, a 12% decrease in referrals, a modest change in rejected cases, and so on. But I want to tell you that as we go through the data, these numbers that you will be looking at have to be examined with a little bit of caution. There's a saying, I was trained originally in economics, and there's a saying that not everything that can be measured is meaningful, and not everything that is meaningful can be measured. And so you have to look at these numbers and try to see what they are perhaps raising as questions. So the sort of the second principle that guides my review of these cases is statistics pose questions. They really don't answer issues. You really have to identify aberrations in data and then delve deep into it in order to identify what's going on. The other thing we have to kind of bear in mind as we go through these statistics is in a lot of cases, the data will have a little parenthetical showing a number like 5 or 7 or 8, or sometimes 63 or 75. The small numbers mean that those are just a relatively few cases that are being looked at in that category. And anytime you have a very small set of numbers, you know, you've got to look at the changes as really probably not being that meaningful. Additionally, when you look at the fact that we're kind of only covering 2 years here, when you deal with chronological data, that is data over various time periods, you have to be very cautious because while some of these numbers might suggest trends, perhaps trends that make our office look good or the dental board look good, other ones may not, but probably in most cases you really need to be cautious about drawing any conclusions until we have more years behind us. So in the full report that you have before you, the very last page where the conclusion is, there's this sentence that says that over time, this report will reveal trends and correlations that can be used to drive beneficial changes in business processes. Or put differently, until you have more years behind us, we'd be very hesitant to draw conclusions based on the limited number, really 2 or 3 years. We have 3 years of data. The first year of data, 2016 data, is not captured here, and we did some, frankly, some more careful data acquisition that makes the 2016 data less useful for comparison to the current data we have been using for the last 2 years. So for the dental board here, this shows that there has been accusations, which means referrals from the dental board to the Attorney General's office, decreased over the last 2 years from 110 to 98. And you might ask, boy, does that suggest anything? And this is another example where I would be cautious about drawing any conclusion. If, for example, a lot of referrals come from an agency towards the end of the fiscal year, it's going to show a lot of referrals that year, but the accusations will not have been filed till the next fiscal year. And so you can show a decrease in referrals, but an increase in accusations. That's just one example of how this information has to be taken somewhat cautiously. Further investigations, again, this is generally helpful. This means that the quality of investigations that our office receives is improving such that we're having to request further information less frequently. But again, the sample size here is really pretty low. And so it would be you'd be careful to want to draw any conclusions from that. Accusations filed. So here's a case where the number of accusations filed this last fiscal year compared to the prior one went up 13%. Well, at the same time, you just saw a moment ago the fact that referrals decreased. So this is a case where there is probably a factor in the change of the fiscal year period that is making these numbers look perhaps stand out a little bit more than they otherwise would. But it could be that, in fact, we're getting more work. We have hired in the last 2 or 3 years another, I think, about 17 deputies across the state. So our section has roughly 144 professionals, attorneys, and paralegals who work on our matters. And the fact that we have had to hire additional paralegals and attorneys suggests, of course, that we are getting more work across the board from our client agencies. Accusations withdrawn. Accusations can be withdrawn for any one of a number of reasons, which are in the materials, such as there's additional facts that come to light that make the case less unable for us to establish clear and convincing evidence. Sometimes, and this has happened to me, actually it happened to me, I believe, in a dental case several years ago, where the licensee died. And so then we made a determination, the board made the determination, the executive officer, that rather than leave a pending accusation against a deceased party that would harm perhaps the reputation of that person who's now passed away, the accusation was just withdrawn in the interest of justice. So there's a lot of reasons that go into why a matter may be withdrawn. This is something that over time we're going to pay close attention to, which is, and this is perhaps in my view, perhaps the overall statistic that everyone is interested in, which is how fast are we processing cases. And this shows some improvement, a decrease from the time when we receive an assignment from the board to the time when we file an accusation. From the time period, however, from the accusation filed when we request further investigation, there's also been a decrease. But I'm not sure, again, given the few matters that require further investigation, that statistic is all that meaningful. This shows the period of accusation from the time of filing to settlement. Now, this shows an increase. That's something that we really don't want to see over a long period of time. And I'm confident that we'll see improvement of that, but I'm, again, cautious about drawing any conclusions from just comparing 2 years from that. Here is this is another area that the legislature wants information, so the time from the accusation filed to the hearing requested. This has actually increased for the cases that are sampled here. It's an interesting statistic. One of the things that we try to do is to settle cases early on after the filing of a a disciplinary matter before we request hearings. And sometimes that can mean that if a case doesn't settle, it delays a little bit the final prosecution of a matter. I'm not sure that that's true specifically of the dental board, but a lot of our clients like us to try to settle them aggressively. So there's a lot of potential explanations for that number, and without looking at really the trend over a period of 3 or 4 more years, could we give you any good conclusions on that? So one of the other aphorisms is that what can be measured can be improved. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do by identifying all of these periods of time, from the time we get an assignment to the time we file the accusation to the time we request a hearing to the time when we settle it or adjudicate it, those are all certain periods of time that we can focus our energies to ensure that we are making progress, find ways to shorten the time frames. For a while, the Office of Administrative Hearings could be difficult to get a hearing date. The Office of Administrative Hearings has made a tremendous effort. They've had a lot of new hirings that allows us to get our cases to hearing now more quickly. So there's a lot of elements that go into the process of reaching these statistics, and I'm confident that over time we will see continued progress. But I think it's going to take at least another probably 2 or 3 years before you can identify very specific trends from which we can make complete deductions. And then the final point, I said that not all data that can be measured is meaningful. Not all meaningful results can be measured. Well, that last point of speed versus due process. We have we have respondent licensees who are entitled to due process. And sometimes, and it just changes from year to year, we get some very aggressive defense counsel who can make the case take longer to adjudicate, and they're entitled to all the processes that can sometimes delay a case by how they conduct themselves in that litigation. And so those are matters outside of our control, but it all serves the purpose of due process, which ultimately has to be the driving consideration when we adjudicate these cases. So that kind of summarizes my report. Anytime you deal with a bunch of data, I'm trying to see if everyone's awake, and everyone actually is. So I'm impressed. Maybe that means that I went through this quickly enough. Are there any questions that any of you have about this information? Perhaps I'll let everyone come back up here so they can raise those questions to me. Any questions that I can address?
Carl, I, for one, found that presentation very interesting, and thank you for being with us and sharing that information. It's nice to know that our processes are being looked at, and like you say, what can be examined can be measured, and we can make improvements, and so that's what we're about. And so thank you so much for that. Board, any questions or comments for Carl?
I have one comment.
Yes.
So about 5 years ago, I asked Greg, are you giving us the best possible price to look at our cases? So I want to ask you, are we getting the best bang for our buck?
Well, I thought you were going to be addressing our billing rate, so I'm glad that that wasn't the question. I can tell you that having been a supervisor in Greg's role and as a senior assistant in my new role, I'm very proud of the service that our deputies provide to the dental board and to other agencies around the state. Our billing rate, which I'm not going to go into, is very modest. And in the same way that you're not here serving for the money, our deputies come here to serve, and I can tell you this from having interviewed them. They come here because they want to do good. They want to be on the side of justice, and they want to do the right thing, and they work very, very hard on cases to give the agencies the very best bang for their buck, I think, as you put it here. And while everyone will always wonder if we could do better, and we all try to improve, and that's why we we measure so many things. This is just a tiny segment of all the information that comes to my attention from the work that we perform. But I can tell you that our staff is absolutely committed to providing the best value for the time and energy that they put into cases that they can possibly give.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
And Greg wanted to answer that question from 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah, it's 5 years ago when we did.
The answer is yes, but no, I was going to add one other thing. Carl made some good points. OAH, I don't know if Karen has noticed or the others have noticed, but OAH within the last, 4 or 5 years has added they used to do it for cases that were set for 4 days or more, and now they've started to for cases that are 3 days or more, having mandatory settlement conferences, and Karen's aware of it. So the effect of that, in answer to your question, is it's forcing the sides to come together quicker, and also forcing the sides to come together, which wasn't the case before until the hearing, which is resulting in better bang for your buck and getting cases resolved that are more maybe that wouldn't have been earlier. So that's just one other point I want to make on that.
So is the trend going more toward that, toward out of try to settle things out of court, basically?
Well, to the extent they can be. I mean, sometimes they can't, as you guys know, you see cases all the time. To the extent they can, but at least the sides are getting together, which allows, both sides to consider everything. Otherwise sometimes as you know, we don't see maybe expert reports and things like that until the end, or, whereas we're seeing it, for the cases, the standard of care cases, we're seeing it earlier, and which in settlement conference, and then it gives Karen and the enforcement staff a better preview before we go to hearing of, what's going on with the case, and maybe there's issues, at least we can identify those. So in other words, it's giving us a sooner a glimpse of what's going on before we go to hearing, and then it's, at that point, it's all cards on the table, and we're going for days, et cetera.
Okay, great, thank you.
One final comment. I had a chance to meet with your executive officer and her senior staff yesterday, and what impressed me a lot about your executive officer is how attentive she is to the details of the management of these cases. That comes to me from the deputies, and you're being very well served, in my opinion, by your staff, a very conscientious staff, and that makes our job a lot easier when we have that kind of very active presence of senior staff as well as the enforcement analysts that are being responsive to our inquiries. So it's very helpful.
I've asked this question of your predecessors, so now it's your turn. One of the things that really bothers me, that almost seems to be boilerplate, is language that says this is the first time this person has been before the board.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. I know what the genesis of that comment is, and you're seeing that in some of these confidential communications that we send. And I think some of those letters are going to be revised a bit over time. So it's one of the things that we try to mark off, because sometimes that's not always true. And by having that sentence in, it flags for the deputy to ensure, is it true? And if it's not present, then that probably tells you a lot more than the mere presence of that sentence. But I appreciate that's a letter that we're going to be working on in the coming months. So thank you very much.
And the other question has to do with it just went rolling right out of my head. It just left the building.
Well, and I'm always here. Should any member of the board have a question that gets your attention that you want some information to, please express it to your
Now I remember. It
Okay.
came back. And it has to do with the number of people who, knowing that there is going to be some kind of discipline, will jump into courses. And that then becomes a part of the defense, that they have taken these courses since that action against them. How do you weigh that?
Well, the actual weighing is really not done by our office so much as it's information that is provided both to the board members in the event of a final decision, because that information, if it comes to the board, it's probably in a, most likely in a proposed decision that you're considering. And in the administrative process, one of the things that all respondents try to do is to mitigate, that is, reduce the severity of what they did based on actions that they took afterwards. And so sometimes that can be courses, sometimes it can be restitution to people who've been harmed by their conduct. And that's all very important information that we ensure in our role gets communicated to staff so that staff can evaluate it for purposes of settlement. And if the case doesn't settle, then it will probably be admitted into evidence and finally reach you in the form of a proposed decision. But we ourselves don't weigh it. We just really make sure that we're the conduit for that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Lauren.
Yeah, going back to the language that we receive, I have also, and we've discussed this in the past, that we did not want to include, like if they studied in India, for example, or studied in so forth in another country, or even went to a certain university, because that might affect some of the decision-making. So I just wondered what have you heard about that? I mean, I know we spoke about it at one point, and we would rather not have that.
And that's a dialogue I think we can have with staff as they gather information that so we can present the information the board really wants to see. And I can imagine it kind of cuts both ways. You know, it, on the one hand, information that you believe could be relevant, you know, then that is information you want to see. If we take away information that you then wonder, what happened here? What is that background? Then that could be itself suggestive of the absence of that information. So those are good questions. I don't have an answer. Those are the questions that, you know, I think will probably be conveyed to your executive officer, and then we'll communicate with our liaison. You have a new liaison who's really terrific, Daniel McGee. And we come back and we consider that information and try to see if we can develop a process that is satisfactory to the board, so we provide to the board the information that it wants. It's sometimes a little difficult with 140 deputies that all of them will, you know, with all our agencies, will kind of see and make sure that they get the right information before you. But it's something that we certainly would try to do and get you the information we want. I've seen, again, every board often has things that they're more interested in and less interested in. And it's always kind of, you know, an effort to kind of meet, you know, the needs that the board wants in order to make an evaluation. And so we're very sensitive to that, and we will take that communication, you know, through your executive officer.
That's a great presentation. Thank you very much for being with us. And I was really pleased to hear your statement about due process being a driving force. That is that was very important for me to hear, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for the invitation of being here today. It's really a treat to get out and meet board members, especially ones such as you, and I'm just glad that we had this opportunity today. Thank you.
And I wanted to thank you also for coming. Thank you for meeting with me and my managers yesterday. That was very informative. And Daniel McGee has been good so far. He's got a little ways to go to reach Greg's level, but Greg was with us for 11 years, so we're sure Daniel's on the right track. Just so board members know, I mentioned to Carl that particularly the San Diego AG's office has really been cranking out the decisions and stipulated settlements, and so you've seen those as they've come through recently. You've voted on them, and so they've really been doing a bang-up job. So thanks again for that.
Great.
Much
Thank you very
appreciated.
much.
I think we're going to be moving now into closed session.
No, because we're done. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
And for the public members, we're actually going to be done until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So for your enjoy.